So CEOs are laying off thousands of workers right now. And, I mean, if you listen to their earnings calls, they are pointing the finger directly at artificial intelligence.
Yeah, it's become the go-to excuse, right?
Exactly. But the actual corporate credit card receipts from over 20,000 U.S. companies, well, they tell a completely different and, frankly, a pretty shocking story.
It really is, because, I mean, it completely contradicts the narrative we hear every day.
Right, because you are constantly bombarded with headlines warning that AI is coming for your job. It creates this, like, ambient anxiety that the robots are here, they are cheaper than you, and they are definitely going to replace you.
Yeah, and it is a pervasive anxiety, and it's driven largely by what generative AI can theoretically do.
Right, theoretical stuff.
Exactly. When you see a model write a flawless block of code in seconds or synthesize a 40-page legal document instantly, it is very easy to draw a straight line from that capability to just, mass unemployment for knowledge workers.
But that straight line is exactly what we are going to challenge in today's deep dive. Because we aren't relying on theoretical predictions or, philosophical debates about what AI might do someday.
No, we have hard empirical data this time.
We do. We are looking at a June 2026 working paper, and it's titled A New Look at AI's Impact on Jobs. It was put together by economists at Ramp and Revelio Labs.
And the power of this research is entirely in that source material. It's just unprecedented.
It really is. They tracked 21,559 U.S. firms, and they did this by linking actual corporate credit card and bill pay data from Ramp directly to real monthly workforce employment histories from Revelio Labs.
That linkage right there, that is a monumental shift in economic research. Historically, tracking AI adoption has been, incredibly difficult.
Because it's invisible, right?
Exactly. AI isn't a physical asset. You can't just walk in and count the number of robotic arms on a factory floor.
Yeah. Relying on surveys to measure AI adoption is like asking people if they eat healthy. Everyone says, yes, of course they do.
Right. I had a salad once this week.
Exactly. But this paper, it looks at the actual grocery store receipts. They are tracking the literal line item spending to AI vendors down to the date, the amount, and the specific technology being purchased.
Which solves the fundamental flaw in how we study this. Previous research heavily relied on something called occupational exposure.
Okay, remind me how that works again.
So researchers would look at a job description, assess what an AI could theoretically do, and then calculate an exposure score.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, so if AI could theoretically handle 80% of your daily tasks, the forecast just assumed your job was doomed. But occupational exposure only measures theoretical vulnerability.
Right. It doesn't mean the company actually fired you.
Exactly. It assumes human labor is this static pie, and if AI eats a slice, there's just less for you. But by linking payment data to actual hiring data, we can finally observe the real-world behavior inside firms that are spending actual capital on these tools.
And the reality of that spending is a surprisingly optimistic preview of our own future.
It really is.
But, to get to the actual hiring numbers, we first have to establish a baseline for what using AI actually means in a corporate setting.
Right.
Because buying a few ChatGPT subscriptions doesn't really make a company an AI adopter, right?
Right. The data reveals a massive divide between companies that are just dabbling in AI and companies undergoing serious structural transformations.
So how did the researchers separate those two groups?
Well, they had to draw a line somewhere, so they introduced a metric called AI spend per employee per month, or PPM.
PPM there.
Yeah, and they tracked this metric over the first 3 months of a company's sustained AI adoption. They define sustained adoption as spending at least $100 a month on AI vendors for 3 consecutive months.
Got it.
And based on that spending intensity, they split the adopting companies into 2 completely different camps.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the gap between these two camps is wild.
Oh, it's huge.
The low-intensity adopters are spending an average of just $2.78 per employee per month in those first 3 months. But the high-intensity adopters are spending $33.67.
A massive jump.
It is. But I do have to push back a little here. $33 a month per employee still sounds like a relatively tiny investment for a modern corporation.
Oh,
No.
I mean, it does sound low on paper.
Yeah, like companies spend more than that on office snacks or legacy software licenses that just sit totally unused. Is a $33 monthly spend really enough to fundamentally rewire how a company operates?
What's fascinating here is that the $33 is merely the initial financial footprint of a much larger operational shift. You have to remember, we're only looking at the very first 3 months of their adoption journey.
Okay, so it's just the starting line.
Right. That low-intensity spend of under $3, that usually represents a firm just buying a handful of basic chat subscriptions for, like, a few isolated marketing employees.
But the high-intensity spend is different.
Very different. That spend of over $33 means the company is investing in advanced infrastructure. We are talking coding agents, API tokens, cloud GPUs, and model serving.
Oh, okay. So that $33 is like buying the first bag of cement.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, like the cost is small, but it signals to the market that you are clearing land, you're securing permits, and you're getting ready to build a skyscraper.
A perfect way to frame it. You don't buy cloud GPUs and integrate complex API tokens into your backend without making massive complementary investments.
Because it takes human effort to set all that up.
Exactly. You are committing developer time, management oversight, and heavy organizational restructuring just to make those tools actually work. The $33 is just the measurable software cost of a firm that is actively re-architecting its core workflows.
Okay, so if they are fundamentally rewiring their technical infrastructure and spending capital on cloud GPUs, that operational shift has to eventually show up in the human resources department.
Yes, it definitely does.
Which brings us to the ultimate consequence of that heavy adoption. What actually happens to the headcount when that intensive AI spend kicks in?
This is where the paper completely inverts the mainstream narrative. For the high-intensity AI adopters, the ones pouring that foundation total headcount goes up by 10.2% over the 24 months following their initial AI adoption.
Wow, a 10.2% expansion. Not a contraction.
Nope, an expansion.
And what about the low-intensity adopters, the ones buying the chat subscriptions?
The low-intensity dabblers see zero statistically significant change in their overall headcount. None.
That is wild. But, okay, the natural skepticism here is endogeneity, right?
Yes, the classic correlation versus causation problem.
Because if I think about this specific type of company that's buying cloud GPUs and coding agents, I am picturing a flush, venture-backed tech startup that was probably going to hire a bunch of people anyway.
Sure, that's a very fair assumption.
We can't just compare a hyper-growth software firm to a sleepy local logistics company and assume the AI is what caused the hiring, right?
No, you can't. That selection bias is a major hurdle in economic research, and the authors tackled it using what's called a staggered adoption model.
Okay, how does that work?
Well, they recognized that comparing adopters to never adopters would just give us noise. So they isolated the effect of the technology by comparing early high-intensity adopters to firms that will become high-intensity adopters later, but just haven't flipped the switch yet.
Oh, that's clever. So they are keeping the company profile completely constant.
Exactly.
They take two fast-growing, highly technical companies. Company A adopts complex AI infrastructure in January. Company B is on the exact same growth trajectory, but they don't adopt AI until, say, a year later.
Yes. And by tracking Company A's headcount during that gap year, controlling for industry sectors, the post-adoption paths widen dramatically.
Meaning Company A pulls ahead.
Significantly. Company A's headcount growth accelerates relative to Company B. This staggered design proves that the intensive AI adoption is actually the catalyst causing the structural expansion, rather than just a byproduct of a company that was already growing anyway.
I'm guessing this hiring surge doesn't happen on day one, though, right?
No, definitely not.
Because integrating a new cloud GPU pipeline and getting employees to actually change their habits, that requires months of trial, error, and sheer organizational friction.
You're spot on. The event study charts in the paper visualize that friction perfectly. There is a distinct learning curve.
What does that curve look like?
Well, in the first few months post-adoption, the hiring growth is essentially flat. The acceleration doesn't truly begin until 6 to 12 months out.
Wow, so there's a big lag.
Yeah, but by month 18, the hiring growth directly caused by this high-intensity AI adoption reaches about 32%.
That is massive. But what is actually happening inside the company during that 6 to 12-month lag?
They are discovering their bottlenecks. In those early months, management is figuring out data pipelining, dealing with compliance reviews, and establishing internal best practices.
Just getting the plumbing to work.
Right. But once those workflows solidify, the realization hits. Their core engineering team is suddenly producing features twice as fast. They have newfound immense productivity.
And that changes everything.
It does. But that productivity creates a vacuum elsewhere in the company, which forces them to expand their operations to support all the new output.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because that vacuum completely contradicts our assumptions about who gets hired.
It really does.
The common wisdom is that AI writes the first drafts, does the basic research, and churns out the junior-level boilerplate code.
Intern work, basically.
Exactly. If the AI is doing the intern's job, nobody's going to hire junior staff anymore. But the data says the exact opposite.
It is arguably the most counterintuitive finding in the entire study. Among those high-intensity adopters, entry-level headcount doesn't shrink.
It doesn't.
No. It rises by 12.0% over that same 24-month period, which actually outpaces the total firm growth.
Okay, we have to drill down into the mechanism there. How does automating entry-level tasks lead to a massive spike in entry-level hiring?
You have to view AI as a multiplier for senior talent, rather than just a simple replacement for junior talent.
Okay, give me an example.
Let's look at software development. If a senior engineer is using an advanced coding agent, they are suddenly generating 5 times the amount of code they used to.
Right, they become super coders.
But that generated code isn't perfect. It requires QA testing, security reviews, integration into existing code bases, and of course, documentation.
Oh, wow. The bottleneck shifts.
Exactly the point.
The constraint is no longer writing the code. The constraint is validating and managing the sheer volume of new output.
The senior engineer is now operating almost like a manager of an automated system. To sustain that level of output, they suddenly need a larger army of junior staff to handle the integration, the edge cases, and the deployment.
So the AI didn't replace the junior developer.
Not at all. It increased the demand for their oversight capabilities. In fact, the data shows that entry-level workers make up a higher share of the overall workforce at the end of those 24 months, while the manager plus share of the workforce actually drops by about 1.5 percentage points.
So the companies are scaling up the base of their operations to support the hyper-productivity at the top.
Exactly.
So if entry-level hiring is up 12%, what functional roles are actually being filled? They can't just be hiring armies of junior developers and prompt engineers.
No, the expansion is incredibly broad across the entire organization. When we look at the high-intensity adopters, sales headcount goes up by 10.3%.
Wow, okay.
Administrative roles go up by 7.8%. Engineering naturally rises by 7.3%, and customer service grows by 6.3%.
So these gains are heavily siloed in the information sector, though, right? Which makes perfect sense, since they already have the engineering density required to implement complex models.
That is a crucial caveat, yes. The researchers broke the data down by broad industry sectors, and while the hiring gains are broad across departments within the adopting firms themselves are highly concentrated.
Where are they concentrated mostly?
In software, internet platforms, and media. The typical AI adopter in this dataset is a larger, higher-paying, highly technical firm that is likely venture-backed.
And they have a lot of engineers on staff already.
Yes, the data reveals that AI adoption actually peaks when a firm's engineering share sits right between 30 and 50%.
You know, that 30 to 50% sweet spot tells a really clear story.
How so?
Well, think about it. If you have almost 0 engineers, you lack the technical capacity to evaluate and deploy a custom AI infrastructure.
Right, you just don't have the internal talent to make it work.
But if you are 90% engineers, you are likely an ultra-specialized R&D shop without a broad operational base. So the companies thriving are the ones with enough technical muscle to build the engine and enough non-technical staff to actually drive the car.
And that balance is exactly what drives the broad departmental hiring. It is the complement effect at scale.
Let's trace a new feature through that complement effect just to visualize it.
Let's do it.
So AI makes those engineers highly productive, so they ship 3 new product features this quarter instead of just 1.
Okay.
Now, you fundamentally need more marketing copywriters to announce those features. You need a larger sales team to pitch those features to enterprise clients.
Right. The product is useless if nobody sells it.
Exactly. And when the sales team closes those deals, you need more administrative staff to process the new revenue and more customer service reps to handle the influx of new users. The AI in the engineering department basically creates a cascade of labor demand across the entire company.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, though, that cascade is currently constrained by the maturity of the tools.
What do you mean by that?
Right now, the most commercially effective AI applications are coding agents and software development assistants. Software companies can immediately leverage these to lower their core production costs, get a massive return on investment, and trigger that cascade of hiring you just described.
But if you run a physical logistics company, a coding agent doesn't really help you load a truck faster.
Exactly. The structural side of that is why sectors like construction, agriculture, and healthcare are currently seeing AI adoption rates hovering way down around 14 or 15%.
Because it's hard to automate physical space.
Yes. Until AI vendors achieve product market fit for workflows that involve physical space, specialized hardware, or non-digital text, those massive productivity and hiring gains will remain largely confined to the information sector.
Okay, so what does this all mean? We have dug through staggered adoption models, learning curves, and all these structural shifts.
It's a lot of data.
It is. But if we bring this right down to the listener's daily life, if you are a young person entering the labor market, or, if you are considering a mid-career pivot, the data provides an incredibly clear signal.
It really does.
When choosing between two similar firms, choose the one making sustained, heavy financial investments in AI infrastructure. They are the true engines of economic expansion right now.
It completely flips the risk profile.
It really does.
The instinctive fear is to avoid companies leaning heavily into AI because you assume they're automating your future job away. But the empirical reality is that you should run toward those companies.
Because they're the ones actually growing.
Yes, their intense AI spend is the strongest predictor we have for near-term headcount growth.
This data creates a massive contradiction for me, though.
Oh, with the CEOs?
Yes. If we know, based on actual cleared credit card spend and employment records, that high-intensity adopters are expanding, why are Fortune 500 CEOs loudly blaming AI for mass layoffs on their earnings calls?
It's baffling, isn't it?
It is. We constantly see quotes saying things like, "We are reducing our global headcount by 5,000 to lean into our AI strategy." It makes no sense with what we just discussed.
Well, the researchers address this directly, and they label it the trust problem. And the empirical data suggests you should be deeply skeptical of those executive statements. Absolutely. The data strictly contradicts the narrative that high-intensity AI adoption causes firm-level job loss.
So they're essentially using the technology as a PR shield for bad quarterly earnings.
The structural reality of public markets makes it a very convenient scapegoat. Imagine a company that overhired during a boom cycle or is suddenly facing severe macroeconomic headwinds.
Okay, so they are bleeding cash.
Right, and they're forced to execute layoffs to protect their margins. But simply announcing layoffs makes executive management look incompetent to Wall Street.
Right, it signals a complete failure of planning.
But if you spin those exact same layoffs as a strategic restructuring to leverage artificial intelligence, it suddenly sounds like an innovative, forward-looking business strategy.
Wow. So it placates investors while completely masking operational failures.
Exactly. But the actual receipts, the ramp payment data linked to Revelio's workforce histories, they prove that true high-intensity AI adopters are doing the exact opposite. They are expanding.
So the companies firing people and blaming AI are typically the ones not making those heavy structural investments.
Spot on.
It's an incredible reminder that empirical data based on actual corporate spending cuts right through the corporate PR spin.
It really does.
But, it also paints a picture of a future that has its own unique set of severe challenges.
Yeah, this raises an important question for all of us to consider. The data proves that realizing the incredible benefits of AI is not just a flip of a switch.
No, not at all.
It requires a grueling 6 to 12-month learning curve, heavy organizational restructuring, and serious, sustained financial investment.
That's hard work.
Very hard work. So if that is the barrier to entry, what happens to the gap between the AI haves and the AI have-nots over the next decade?
That is the big question.
Are we looking at a permanent structural divide where a small group of highly productive, hyper-expanding companies completely detach from the rest of the economy? Watch the companies around you. The receipts show that this divide is being cemented right now.
That is a fascinating and honestly slightly terrifying structural reality to leave on. The impending storm isn't that the robots are coming to fire you. The real storm is that the companies willing to endure the organizational friction to implement the robots are going to completely outpace the companies who don't.
Absolutely.
And you definitely want to be inside the walls of the ones holding the grocery receipts for the heavy AI spend. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. It is always a thrill to cut through the narrative and unpack the real mechanisms driving the labor market with you. Keep an eye on those receipts, and we will catch you on the next one.